How did 5 ordinary teenagers who auditioned for a singing competition as solo artists become the biggest band on the planet almost overnight? How did they navigate the dizzying heights of global superstardom? And what happens when the ride inevitably comes to an end? In this documentary, we will trace their incredible journey from the dusty audition rooms of the X Factor to selling out stadiums worldwide. We'll explore the release of their iconic anthems, the rise of the incredibly powerful Directioner fandom, the cracks that began to show under the spotlight, and their decision to take a break that would last far longer than anyone anticipated. Finally, we'll follow their paths as they forged unique and successful solo careers, forever carrying the legacy of the band that started it all. So, whether you were there from the start, screaming the lyrics to "What Makes You Beautiful," or you're just discovering their magic now, get ready. This is the definitive story of One Direction. Our story begins in the summer of 2010. The setting: the audition stages of the UK's biggest singing competition, the X Factor. Thousands dreamed of glory, but for 5 particular boys, this was about to become the most important day of their lives, and they had no idea they were about to meet each other. Let's meet them as the judges did, one by one. First, there was Liam Payne, a 16-year-old from Wolverhampton who had already battled serious health issues as a child. He walked in with a quiet confidence, a boy with an old soul and a surprisingly powerful, soulful voice. He was the earnest one, the fighter. Then, Harry Styles, just 16, from the tiny Cheshire village of Holmes Chapel, with his floppy brown hair and a smile that could disarm anyone. He sauntered in, singing a throwback R&B song. He was charming, a little cheeky, and oozed a natural, effortless charisma that the cameras simply loved. Next, Niall Horan, a 15-year-old from Mullingar, Ireland, with a bright blonde haircut and an even brighter personality. He brought his guitar and an infectious, sunny optimism. He was the kid who just genuinely, utterly loved to sing. No pretense, just pure joy. And Louis Tomlinson, the oldest of the group at 18, from Doncaster. Confident lad with a glint of mischief in his eye. He was the Joker, the one with a sharp wit and a lovable laddish charm that made him instantly relatable. And finally, Zayn Malik, a quiet 17-year-old from Bradford. He was strikingly handsome, with a shy, almost mysterious aura. But when he opened his mouth to sing, something magical happened. A smooth, incredible R&B voice emerged that was light years ahead of his age. Individually, they were talented, each earning a coveted yes to the next round. But behind the scenes, the judges felt that individually, they weren't quite strong enough to win the entire competition. The legendary, hard-to-please Simon Cowell saw raw potential, but it was fellow judge and Pussycat Dolls star Nicole Scherzinger who had the brilliant, lightning bolt idea. She famously suggested, "Why don't you put them together?" In that moment, pop history was rewritten. They were sent away to practice and returned not as 5 soloists, but as one group. The name, famously suggested by Harry Styles, captured their new mission perfectly: to move in one direction. The rest, as they say, is history. But what a history it was. So, 5 strangers were thrown into a house to become a band. Imagine the chaos: different accents, different personalities, different tastes in music. It was a pressure cooker. But almost instantly, a bond began to form. The cheeky banter between Louis and Harry became the group's comedic backbone. Quiet Zayn found a brother in the equally reserved Liam, who often took on a de facto leadership role. And Niall? Niall was the sunshine, the peacemaker, the one who could diffuse any tension with a joke and his guitar. But it wasn't all fun and games. The competition was brutal. They were the experiment, the manufactured group, and many critics were waiting for them to fail. The first real test of their bond came during the infamous judges' houses round. The pressure was immense. They had to learn harmonies, choreography, and become a unit in days. There were arguments, frustrations, tears. The fear of going home was real. And here comes one of the first real, raw moments that fans would never forget. During rehearsals, Zayn, overwhelmed by the stress and perhaps doubting the entire process, almost quit. He packed his bags and was ready to leave. This wasn't what he signed up for. It was the other four who stopped him. They talked him down, they reassured him. In that moment, they weren't just competitors, they were a team. They made a pact. It was all five of them, or none of them. This vulnerability, this early struggle, was the secret glue that cemented them. It was their first secret, and it wouldn't be their last. That resilience paid off. Their first performance as a group, a rendition of Torn, wasn't perfect, but it had something else, undeniable chemistry. You could see it. They were having fun on stage, joking around, and the audience responded to that energy. Simon Cowell saw it too. He saw the potential for a global phenomenon. They weren't just singing. They were selling a fantasy of friendship, brotherhood, and being the five boys next door that every girl could dream about. And the world was starting to buy it. They didn't win the X Factor. They finished third. But in a stunning twist, that didn't matter. They had already won the hearts of millions. The day after the finale, their cover of Torn skyrocketed to #1 on the UK iTunes charts. It was a clear message. The people had chosen their winner. The machine behind them, led by Simon Cowell, shifted into hyperdrive. They were signed instantly. The dream was real, but the fairy tale was over. The grueling work began. The next few years were a blur of airports, hotels, screaming fans, and non-stop promotion. The image was one of five best friends who never fought. The reality? They were five alpha males, thrown together in a pressure cooker of unimaginable fame. Conflict wasn't just inevitable. It was a constant undercurrent. The biggest tension often revolved around one thing: creative control. From the very beginning, a subtle hierarchy formed. Liam Payne, with his strong voice and serious work ethic, often found himself the de facto leader during rehearsals and vocal arrangements. He was the anchor, the one who took the responsibility most to heart. But this could come across as controlling, creating friction with more free-spirited members. The main clash of styles was between Liam and Louis Tomlinson. Louis, the oldest and most defiant, fiercely believed in his own instincts. He fought hard to contribute to the songwriting, pushing for a more rock-oriented, authentic sound that reflected their tastes, not just the label's formula. He was often frustrated, feeling his ideas were dismissed. This created a silent power struggle, the company man versus the rebel. Their differing energies, Liam's discipline versus Louis's rebellion, were a source of both creative tension and personal friction. Then there was Zayn. His musical tastes were radically different from the group's pop anthems. He craved R&B and hip-hop, often feeling artistically stifled. This led to passive resistance, being quieter in interviews, less engaged in the pop star performance. He wasn't fighting for leadership. He was retreating inward, which the others could perceive as aloofness or a lack of commitment, adding another layer of misunderstanding. Harry and Niall often played the role of peacemakers. Harry, with his easygoing charm, could diffuse tension with a joke. Niall, the ultimate diplomat, was the glue, everyone's friend. But even Harry began to flex his creative muscles, quietly pushing for more influence, which subtly shifted the group's dynamic over time. They loved each other as brothers do, but brothers fight. They competed for lines in songs, for attention in interviews, for their voices to be heard both literally and figuratively. This wasn't a manufactured boy band pretending to get along. This was a real, messy, complicated brotherhood, fighting for its soul under the brightest lights in the world. The term directioner became a badge of honor for a fiercely loyal, digitally savvy army that broke Twitter records and made their idols inescapable. But behind the curated smiles and matching outfits, the pressure was immense. This is where the first real cracks in the perfect facade began to show, and it often centered around Louis Tomlinson. While the band's image was built on being 5 lovable single lads, reality had other plans. Rumors about Louis' long-term girlfriend Eleanor Calder swirled, creating a silent tension with management, who preferred the boys to appear available. Then, in 2 earth-shattering moments for the fandom, the truth broke through. First, the revelation that Louis had a secret son, Freddie, with a stylist. The news was managed, controlled, but the fallout was massive. It shattered the carefully constructed boy-next-door illusion forever. And second, the leak of an incredibly private, stolen video that sent shockwaves through the fandom. It allegedly showed Louis with a male friend. For a part of the fandom deeply invested in the Larry Stylinson narrative, the belief that Louis and Harry were in a secret relationship, this was seen as potential confirmation. For Louis and the band, it was a devastating and humiliating invasion of privacy. Louis' reaction was fierce and public. He took to Twitter to condemn the leak, calling it a vile invasion of his privacy and showing a raw, angry side that fans rarely saw. This incident wasn't about confirming a specific relationship with one person. It was about the brutal violation of his personal life and the intense pressure to control a narrative that was spiraling out of control. This wasn't just about Louis. The pressure was getting to everyone. Zayn, always the most private and introverted, began to visibly struggle with the relentless scrutiny and the pop star persona. He was often quiet in interviews, sometimes seeming distant. Whispers about his anxiety and unhappiness started to circulate. He was the first to openly clash with the image, getting a large tattoo that management reportedly disliked, a small act of rebellion. Meanwhile, Liam, the earnest leader, shouldered the burden of keeping the group professional, often becoming the spokesman, which added its own layer of stress. They were brothers, bound by an incredible experience no one else could understand. But they were also 5 individuals trapped in a gilded cage, growing up in public and starting to pull in very different directions. The world saw a perfect boy band. But behind the scenes, the foundation was already beginning to shake. The carefully maintained facade was now crumbling in plain sight. The relentless machine of fame demanded everything from them, and it was Zayn Malik who reached his breaking point first. The quietest member, the artist with a soulful R, B Hart, trapped in a pop anthem world, was suffocating. While the world saw screaming fans and glory, Zayn felt the walls closing in. The grueling tour schedule, the brutal lack of privacy, and the inability to create music that truly felt like his own became an unbearable weight. The cracks were no longer whispers, they were headlines. He began to retreat, missing key appearances. The official reason always stress and anxiety. But the fandom knew. A nervous energy took hold. The unthinkable was starting to feel inevitable. Then, in March 2015, the seismic shockwave hit. Official statements confirmed it. Zayn Malik was leaving One Direction. The reason? A desperate need for a normal life, away from the glaring spotlight. For millions of fans, it was a heartbreak that echoed around the world. The perfect picture was shattered, but behind the polished PR statements, a more complex reality simmered. For the 4 remaining members, Harry, Louis, Liam, and Niall, the emotions were a turbulent mix of shock, understanding, and the daunting task of facing the future as a quartet. Their first performance as a 4-piece was an emotional earthquake. On stage in Jakarta, just days later, the atmosphere was thick with unsaid words. And then, during Strong, a song about resilience, the dam broke. Louis Tomlinson, the group's joker, its defiant heart turned from the crowd, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. It was a moment of pure, unvarnished truth, a raw display of grief, pressure, and brotherly love that no scripted show could ever capture. This wasn't a performance, it was a catharsis. They carried on with a stoic professionalism, recording one final album, Made in the AM. The music was tinged with a new maturity and a bittersweet sense of farewell. Songs like History felt less like a track list and more like a heartfelt epilogue to an incredible era. They smiled for the cameras, but the chapter was already closing. The energy had shifted. The unspoken truth was now a quiet ache. The ride was over. The hiatus was no longer a rumor. It was a relief. The truth they could no longer outrun was finally made official in August 2015. The announcement felt both shocking and inevitable. One Direction was taking an extended hiatus. The word itself was a carefully chosen balm for the fans' hiatus, not breakup. It promised a return. Someday, maybe, but in their hearts, everyone knew. And chapter of unprecedented pop culture history was closing. The machine, stretched to its absolute limit, was powering down. For the first time in 5 years, the world braced for silence. But silence was the last thing that followed. Instead, the void was filled by the deafening roar of 5 individual engines igniting at once. What happened next was a breathtaking metamorphosis. The 5 boys from the band were gone. In their place emerged 5 distinct artists, each scrambling to define who they were without the uniform, without the safety net, and without the others. Zayn Malik moved first and fastest. Just a year after his departure, he released his debut solo album, Mind of Mine. It was a statement of intent, sleek, sensual, and steeped in the moody R&B he'd always loved. The lead single, Pillow Talk, was a world away from One Direction's sunny pop. It was provocative, intimate, and shot straight to #1 globally. Zayn wasn't just making music. He was meticulously constructing the authentic artistic identity he had craved all along. The transformation was just as radical for Harry Styles. He didn't just step away from One Direction. He seemingly vaporized its shadow. He grew his hair, embraced flamboyant 70s rock flair, and collaborated with rock legends. His self-titled debut album wasn't just new music. It was a manifesto. Tracks like Sign of the Times were epic, Bowie-esque ballads that screamed, "The boy band heartthrob is dead." Meet the Rock Star. It was a daring, almost arrogant reinvention that left critics in awe and proved his depth. Niall Horan took the opposite route, leaning into authenticity. He stayed the sunny, approachable guy everyone loved, simply armed with an acoustic guitar. His sound was comfortable, folk-infused pop, a direct continuation of the warmth he brought to 1D. Songs like This Town felt like a familiar hug, a promise that while everything had changed, some things, thankfully, had not. Liam Payne, the group's anchor, perhaps struggled the most with his new identity. He aggressively pivoted towards slick, urban pop, chasing chart success with collaborations featuring rappers. It was a stark departure from the group's sound, a conscious effort to shed the nice guy image and be seen as a modern, edgy hitmaker. The journey was public, messy, and filled with the growing pains of a man desperately searching for his new sound. And Louis Tomlinson. His path was the most personal. He wore his heart on his sleeve, channeling his Britpop influences and his immense grief after the devastating loss of his mother and sister into raw, guitar-driven anthems about resilience and heartache. His music felt like a direct line to his soul, a defiant middle finger to the pain. He wasn't just making music. He was building a survival kit for himself and his loyal fans. They were free, all 5 of them, on their own terms. But that freedom came with a price for the four who stayed. The constant, haunting question from every interviewer, every fan, on every red carpet. When is the reunion? A question that forever tied their new identities to the ghost of the band they once were. The official story was one of brotherhood and hit songs. But the real story, the one that fueled 1 billion Tumblr posts and Twitter threads, happened in the shadows. This is the chapter they never meant for you to see. Let's talk about the mysteries. First, the multi-million-dollar secret, the book. In 2018, a bombshell dropped. A tell-all biography titled Reality of the Band was announced, written by a former head of security. It promised never-before-seen photos and shocking revelations about affairs, feuds, and the dark side of fame. The fandom went into a meltdown. Pre-orders skyrocketed. And then, nothing. The book vanished. It was quietly pulled from all retailers. The rumors that management and the label intervened, buying out the entire print run to bury the secrets forever. To this day, no one knows what was in those pages. It remains the holy grail of Directioner lore. Then, the feud that wasn't, the narrative of a bitter rivalry between Zayn and Liam, was a tabloid dream. It started with subtle, cryptic subtweets and escalated into a full-blown social media war in 2019, with both men trading public, angry jabs. The internet chose sides. But was it real? Or a calculated, desperate attempt by both, especially Liam, struggling to define his solo career to stay relevant through controversy? The truth is likely a messy mix of genuine resentment and performative drama. The fire eventually died, but the ashes of that friendship still smolder. And we cannot ignore the contracts. The most boring yet most revealing piece of the puzzle. Leaked documents and industry insiders have suggested that the original One Direction contracts with Psycho Music were famously restrictive, tying the boys to lengthy terms and a significant share of their earnings. This wasn't just a band. It was a corporate empire. Understanding this helps explain the immense pressure, the eventual burnout, and perhaps even the financial complexities that make a reunion not just a question of friendship, but a logistical and legal minefield of epic proportions. These aren't just gossip. They are the fault lines that ran beneath the polished surface. They explain the desperation, the tension, and the immense price tag attached to the world's biggest boy band. The music was the product, but this was the cost. The music was only part of the story. Away from the studios and stages, the 5 former bandmates were navigating a minefield of personal dramas, public scandals, and legal battles that would forever shape their individual legacies. The spotlight never dimmed. It just started a series of fires. Louis Tomlinson's journey was the most heart-wrenching. In just a few years, he faced unimaginable grief, losing his beloved mother, Johanna, to leukemia in 2016, and then his younger sister, Félicité, to an accidental overdose in 2019. The world watched as he endured these tragedies in the public eye, his pain raw and exposed. Yet, through it all, he championed his role as a father to his son, Freddie, fighting a bitter and private custody battle to remain a constant presence in his life. Proving a resilience far beyond the pop star image, Zayn Malik's pursuit of a normal life was anything but. His high-profile, on-again, off-again relationship with model Gigi Hadid was a constant tabloid fixture, culminating in a very public split in 2021 after an alleged altercation with her mother, Yolanda Hadid, which resulted in a restraining order and a plea deal. This incident painted a picture of a man still struggling with the pressures of fame and personal turmoil, a far cry from the quiet normalcy he claimed to seek. Liam Payne's path was a public roller coaster of controversies. From candid, often shocking podcast revelations about his time in the band and his struggles with mental health and substance abuse, to a tumultuous relationship with influencer Maya Henry that ended in a called-off engagement. Each headline felt like a cry for help, a stark contrast to the polished boy band image, revealing a man deeply lost in the aftermath of the group's fame and desperately searching for his identity. In mid-October 2024, a night in Buenos Aires turned into headlines around the world. The Liam Payne is dead. Inside the Casa Sur Palermo Hotel, staff pick up the phone and call for help. Not a tabloid script, just an urgent report. A guest is in distress, acting erratically, possibly under the influence. Please send someone now. City records and officials later described the sequence in the same controlled language. A 911 call near 5 o'clock. Police units move first. The city's emergency medical service, SAME, follows within minutes. Responders reach the inner courtyard and confirm there is nothing more they can do. The location is fixed. Third-floor balcony, interior patio. The response is fast, and the first official wording is clinical. Multiple traumatic injuries, death confirmed at the scene. Even the seemingly steady Niall Horan faced his share of quiet controversies, mostly financial and legal. He became embroiled in a lawsuit with his former management, alleging mismanagement of millions of dollars of his earnings, a case that pulled back the curtain on the complex and often cutthroat business machinery that had been driving his career since he was a teenager. And Harry Styles, for all his critical acclaim, couldn't escape the intense scrutiny of his personal life. His relationships with older, high-profile women like Olivia Wilde became their own media spectacles, dissected daily, with fans and tabloids alike fueling endless rumors and speculation about breakups, engagements, and his private character, proving that no level of success could buy true privacy. The cost of their fame was a lifetime ticket to a world where every heartbreak, every mistake, and every private struggle would be served as public entertainment. The band had ended, but the spectacle never would. Beyond the choreography and the hit songs, the true magic of One Direction lived in the moments they were left to their own devices. The interviews where they devolved into chaos, the backstage pranks, the uncontrollable laughter. This was the glue, the unscripted, hilarious brotherhood that fans adored. Who could forget the time they completely took over a BBC Radio 1 interview, hijacking the microphones to mockingly sing each other's praises in exaggerated opera voices, reducing themselves and the host to tears of laughter? It was a perfect snapshot of their dynamic. Louis the instigator, Harry the willing participant, Niall the cheerful accomplice, Liam the trying to keep it together leader, and Zayn watching it all unfold with quiet amusement. Or the legendary backstage videos, like the one where Louis, the master prankster, convinced a young, impressionable Harry that a mundane fire safety announcement was, in fact, a very serious and live national broadcast, making Harry panic about his posture and behavior. The pure, unadulterated panic on Harry's face, followed by the group's roaring laughter, is a comedy goldmine. Even their award show moments were unpredictable. Like the time they accidentally accepted an award for the wrong artist, their genuine confusion and subsequent embarrassment making for a more endearing moment than any rehearsed speech ever could. These weren't just jokes. They were the evidence of a real bond. It was the sound of 5 young men trapped in a crazy world, choosing to find joy in each other's company. For the fans, these glimpses of unfiltered friendship were more valuable than any music video. They were the proof that the magic was real. Every great band has its fans. But One Direction had something else entirely: a digital army. They were the first group whose success was not just supported by their fandom, it was engineered by it. The Directioners weren't just spectators. They were the 5th, and perhaps most powerful, member of the band. Before labels fully understood social media, Directioners had already mastered it. They organized like a military operation. They created streaming parties to break records on YouTube and iTunes. They made hashtags trend worldwide for days to celebrate birthdays, anniversaries, or just to show support. They could make a forgotten B-side track chart again years later, just to prove they still could. Their power was absolute and terrifying to the old music industry guard. But their influence went beyond charts. They became a cultural force. They crowdfunded for charities in the band's name, raising millions. They mobilized to support each other through personal crises, creating a global support network. They taught the world a new form of digital activism and community, showing that a shared love for a boy band could translate into real-world impact. And perhaps most iconic of all were the projector projects. Fans would rent massive projectors and beam messages of support, inside jokes, or declarations of love onto the walls of the hotels where the boys were staying. It was a breathtaking, expensive, and utterly unique love letter, a signal in the night that said, "We see you. We are here. We are with you." The music made them stars. But the Directioners made them legends. They proved that in the new world, the audience wasn't just at the show, they were in control of it. For Directioners, every interview, every photo, every tweet was not just content, it was a crime scene to be investigated. The fandom became a global detective agency, dedicated to uncovering hidden meanings and secret messages they believed the boys were leaving for them. This wasn't just fandom, it was an interactive, participatory universe of its own. The most famous and enduring of these was the Larry Stylinson theory, the belief that Louis and Harry were in a secret romantic relationship forced to hide it by their management. Fans became forensic experts, analyzing every glance, every matching accessory, every lyric for proof. They created vast archives of evidence, from GIFs to lengthy Google Docs essays. Whether real or not, Larry became a cultural phenomenon unto itself, a testament to the fans' desire for a deeper, more complex narrative than the one they were being sold. But the decoding didn't stop there. Everything was a potential clue. The colors they wore in photo shoots, the specific emojis they used in tweets, the dates they posted, all of it was scrutinized for patterns. A fan noticing Louis wearing a certain bracelet could spark a week-long investigation across every social platform. It was a giant, global game of connect the dots, where the stakes felt incredibly high because the story felt incredibly real. This hunt for hidden signs created an unparalleled sense of community and intellectual investment. It made the fans feel like active participants in the story, not just passive consumers. They weren't just watching One Direction's career, they were helping to write its secret chapters, one decoded clue at a time. In the end, the truth of any theory was almost irrelevant. What mattered was the connection it forged, a shared secret language between the band and the fans that made the experience of being a Directioner a thrilling, all-consuming, and deeply personal adventure. Every story has an ending, but the story of One Direction is different because it never truly ended. It simply split into 5 new stories, 5 extraordinary solo journeys that continue to unfold. The stadium tours may be silent, the matching outfits retired, but the echo of what they built together is louder than ever. They gave us more than just songs. They gave us an era. They were the last true monoculture boy band, a final burst of shared, global mania before the internet fragmented everything into a million niches. For a generation, they were a universal language. The thrill of a new music video premiere, the agony of choosing a favorite member, the shared joy of singing along with thousands at a concert, these were rites of passage. Look at the landscape of pop music today, and you will see their fingerprints everywhere. The strategy of building a group through a reality show. The undeniable power of a digitally connected fandom to shape an artist's destiny. The way artists now speak directly to their fans. building intimate online communities. One Direction didn't just participate in the music industry, they helped redesign it for the modern age. And what about the Five Boys? They are men now, forever linked by an experience that only they can understand. A bond that was forged in fire, tested by pressure, and stretched to its limit, but one that remains, silent and unbreakable, in the history they wrote together.
You can hear it in the way they still occasionally mention each other, a fondness, a shorthand, a recognition of a shared past that is too big to ever truly be forgotten or dismissed.
The question of a reunion will always hang in the air, a beautiful what if for fans to dream about. But perhaps the reunion is already happening every day. It happens every time a new generation discovers what makes you beautiful on streaming. It happens in the dedicated fan accounts that keep their memory alive. It happens in the quiet understanding between five men who know they were part of something magical. They were a moment in time. A perfect, chaotic, glorious moment that taught us about friendship, about passion, about the cost of dreams, and the unyielding power of believing in something enough to scream it from the rooftops. The music remains. The memories remain. The legacy is forever.